Think you could handle living like our Stone Age ancestors? Think again. This documentary reveals the shocking truth about what it would really take for a modern human to survive in the Paleolithic world, and why most of us wouldn't last 24 hours. From dangerous animals and plants to ancient diseases and the struggle to build a fire. Here are 10 reasons you wouldn't survive 24 hours in the Stone Age. But before we get into it, be sure to smash that like button for more videos. Also, stick around until the end because we'll be counting down some of the things that might actually give you an advantage. Let's jump in with number 10, shelter. You've just woken up. It's a cold winter morning and you have no blanket. It's time to make a shelter or you're gonna freeze to death. No big deal, right? You just gather some sticks and leaves and construct a little hut. Well, think again. Back in the day, early humans spent countless hours planning, constructing, and improving their shelters. In fact, they were so advanced, modern architects are still trying to copy them today. In order to survive the harsh elements, our ancestors crafted amazing structures made out of wood and mammoth bones. They constructed shelters complete with walls, floors, roofs, and even chimneys. Some of these structures were so massive, they would put modern mansions to shame, with the average size of a prehistoric house being about 800 square feet. These dwellings could fit over 10 people and even domesticated animals. In fact, some researchers believe these buildings may have been the first true cities. So unless you had access to all those resources and know how to use them, you'd freeze to death in no time. 9. The fire challenge. Now that you've got shelter, it's time to start a fire. You need to stay warm after all. What could be easier than striking a match? Well, actually making fire from scratch could take you days. That is, if you don't die from something else first. Early humans didn't have matches or lighters. They started fires by rubbing two sticks together and creating friction. This process can take a long time, even for experienced preppers, and it requires certain types of wood. If you're not careful, the fire could go out at any moment. And it's not easy to keep the embers glowing while you work on building your fire. You also need to find materials that can catch and maintain a spark. Otherwise, you're going to have nothing but ashes and smoke to show for your efforts. If you don't get a fire going in time, you'll probably freeze to death before you manage to light anything on fire. Number 8. Hunting and gathering. Now that you're warm, it's time to eat. Unfortunately, there's no drive-thru open late in the Stone Age, so it's up to you to hunt your own food or starve to death. The good news is, there's plenty of wild plants to munch on. The bad news is most of them are poisonous and taste absolutely terrible. Just one wrong move, and you could end up dead before you even finish your meal. Even worse, wild animals are constantly on the lookout for an easy meal. Humans weren't the top predator back then, but they were definitely on the menu. Animals like hyenas, wolves, and saber-toothed tigers all hunted humans. And they weren't afraid to take on an entire tribe. One of the most terrifying predators was the hyena, which could crush a human skull in less than a minute. These scavengers lived in packs and attacked everything from small rodents to adult elephants. They were strong enough to drag their prey several miles away. While this behavior might seem similar to wolves, hyenas are actually more closely related to cats. In fact, they're in the same family as mongooses and civets. Despite their small size, hyenas were fierce hunters and sometimes targeted young children or elderly people. Hyenas also played a vital role in the ecosystem by cleaning up carcasses and helping to prevent the spread of disease. So if you want to survive the Stone Age, you better hope a hyena doesn't target you. Number 7. Invisible killers. In addition to dangerous animals and plants, ancient humans were also threatened by invisible killers, aka diseases. Some of these illnesses still affect us today, such as tuberculosis, leprosy, and venereal disease. Others, however, are long gone. For example, Homo erectus used to suffer from a mysterious wasting disease that caused extreme weight loss and bone pain. Luckily, this illness doesn't affect us anymore because our immune system evolved to fight it off. That is, if you can't come down with a fever, lose a bunch of weight, and die. There's also the small matter of bacteria. Since humans didn't invent hygiene back then, everyone was covered in germs. This meant that cuts and scratches could easily become infected. Even worse, a simple cough could turn into pneumonia and kill you. But the biggest danger was childbirth. Back then, women had much higher mortality rates than men. That's because pregnancy and delivery were extremely risky. In fact, one study found that the risk of dying during childbirth was 1 in 10. So if you plan on having kids in the Stone Age, you'd better pray you don't die in the process. Number 6. The social strategy. Social life wasn't easy in the Stone Age, but it was necessary. In order to survive, our ancestors needed to work together to hunt, gather food, and defend themselves. If you were a loner, you probably wouldn't last very long. Luckily, if you were part of a tight-knit community, you had a much better chance of survival. But that came with its own set of problems. Back then, society was much more rigid than it is today. You couldn't just drop out of school and move across the country. In fact, you were pretty much stuck where you were born. This was because tribes followed a nomadic lifestyle. They moved from place to place in search of food and shelter. This meant that you couldn't just pack up and leave whenever you wanted to. In fact, you'd probably be killed for trying. Each tribe had its own territory, and you weren't allowed to enter it without permission. If you did, you risked starting a war. And if you weren't prepared to fight, you'd probably die in the process. Number 5. Modern advantages. Now let's talk about some of the advantages we have as modern humans. First and foremost, we're bigger and stronger than our ancestors. Back then, the average man stood just under 5 feet tall and weighed about 140 pounds. Women were even smaller, standing just under 5 feet tall and weighing around 110 pounds. By comparison, the average American male stands over 5 feet 9 inches and weighs 200 pounds. Females are usually around 5'3" and weigh about 170 pounds. This means that we are naturally stronger and more resistant to injury than people living in the Stone Age. However, this also makes us more visible and therefore more vulnerable to predators. We're also more intelligent than our ancestors. Back then, the average IQ was around 70. Today, it's closer to 100. This means that we're capable of developing more advanced tools and weapons. No. 4. Fatal weaknesses. One of the biggest disadvantages we face today is our reliance on technology. We've become accustomed to having everything at our fingertips. But this makes us lazy and unable to survive without the comforts of modern life. Take shelter, for example. Most of us live in homes that are insulated and climate-controlled. We don't have to worry about the weather or finding shelter from predators. This has made us weak and vulnerable. Our bodies aren't used to working hard to stay alive. If we were dropped off in the Stone Age, we'd probably collapse from exhaustion within a few days. We're also too clean. We've developed a fear of germs and bacteria, but this has made us weaker and more susceptible to disease. When we were growing up, we were exposed to all sorts of illnesses that helped us develop immunity. Today, most of us haven't been exposed to these diseases and we're more vulnerable than ever. Even a simple cold could kill us. No. 3. Too soft. Another disadvantage we face today is that we're too soft. We don't have to walk long distances to find food or water, and we don't have to carry heavy loads on our backs. This has made us physically weaker than people living in the Stone Age. Our muscles are atrophied and our bodies aren't used to hard work. If we were dropped off in the Stone Age, we'd probably be killed by animals that we could easily outrun today. We're also too comfortable. We're used to having soft beds to sleep on and chairs to sit in, but this has made us weaker and more vulnerable. Our bodies aren't used to sleeping on the ground or sitting for long periods of time. If we were dropped off in the Stone Age, we'd probably suffer from terrible back pain or other injuries. Number 2. Civilization. One of the biggest advantages we have today is civilization. We live in a world where we don't have to worry about predators or dangerous plants. We also have access to healthcare, which helps us fight off diseases that would have killed us in the Stone Age. But this also has its disadvantages. For example, we're surrounded by temptation everywhere we go. There's junk food, sugary drinks, and processed meats. These foods are high in calories, but they don't give us the nutrients we need to survive in the Stone Age. If we were dropped off now, we'd probably starve to death within a few weeks. We also have too many distractions. Back then, people didn't have TVs, phones, or internet. This meant that they had more time to learn survival skills and spend time with their families. Today, we're glued to our screens. We spend hours each day watching TV or scrolling through social media. This means that we're not learning essential skills and we're becoming weaker as a society. And finally, number 1, your brain. Your brain is your greatest asset and biggest weakness. On one hand, it allows you to think ahead, plan for the future, and solve complex problems. This is what helped our ancestors survive and thrive in some of the most challenging environments on Earth. On the other hand, it's also what makes you vulnerable. Your brain is always looking for ways to improve your life. This means that you're constantly bombarded with thoughts about what you want, what you desire, and what you crave. This constant chatter makes it difficult to focus on the task at hand and can lead to poor decisions. In addition, your brain is constantly seeking new experiences. This means that you're always looking for ways to entertain yourself. But this also makes you more susceptible to temptation. When faced with a choice between something that's easy and fun and something that's difficult but necessary, your brain will almost always choose the former. This means that you're more likely to give up when times are tough. So while your brain is what makes you human, it's also what makes you weak. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. But before you go, be sure to smash that like button for more videos. And let us know in the comments which Stone Age challenge you think you'd fare the worst on. We'll see you next time.